Welcome to our deep dive,
Yeah.
into Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life.
It's okay.
This book is
Yeah.
it's a really interesting mix of like personal anecdotes and philosophy
Wow.
and
Yeah.
even some religious imagery.
Yeah.
It's all kind of geared towards
Yeah.
helping us navigate life and, all the complexities,
Yeah.
find a deeper meaning. But it
It's dense.
it is a really dense read. So
Yeah.
that's what we're here for, is to help you
Yeah.
extract those golden nuggets without,
Yeah.
necessarily having to
Yeah.
wade through all the pages.
You know what I find interesting about Peterson's approach is
Yeah.
he really doesn't shy away from the hard truths about
Right.
the human condition. He's
Yeah.
not
Right.
offering these quick fixes or empty platitudes.
Right.
It's he actually draws on,
Yeah.
evolutionary biology,
Yeah.
psychology,
Yeah.
ancient wisdom to give us a
Yeah.
framework for understanding ourselves
Totally.
and the world around us.
Okay, so let's unpack that framework
Okay.
a little bit, starting with rule number 1,
Okay.
which is stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Right.
Now, I got to admit, when I first saw this rule,
Right.
I was like, what does posture have to do with living a meaningful life?
Right.
But then he brings in the lobsters and things get really interesting.
Lobsters. Yes.
Yes, the lobsters.
He uses the dominance hierarchies of lobsters as this analogy for
Yeah.
human behavior.
Right.
And he points out that lobsters that have good posture,
Right.
they're more likely to win fights.
Right.
They secure territory,
Yeah.
attract mates.
Right.
And what's fascinating is he links this back to our own biology.
Yeah, he says even though we're, millions of years of evolution removed from lobsters,
Right.
our brains still respond to posture in a similar way.
Yeah.
Good posture actually boosts serotonin levels,
Yeah.
which can make you feel more confident,
Uh-huh.
less anxious.
Yes. It's not just about looking good. It's about feeling good and behaving differently.
Right. Like your body's giving your mind a signal like,
Yes.
hey, we're in control here.
Exactly.
We can face challenges.
We're ready to face whatever comes our way.
Have you ever noticed like a shift in your mood
Uh-huh.
or your confidence when you adjust your posture?
Yes.
It's really powerful.
Powerful.
And I think that ties into his
Yes.
larger point about taking responsibility for ourselves.
Right.
He introduces this concept called Price's Law,
Okay.
which states that in any field, a small percentage of people
Okay.
produce the majority of the results.
Okay.
He gives some pretty striking examples,
Yeah.
like the fact that the richest 85 people in the world
Okay.
have as much wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion.
Wow.
Right.
And it's not just wealth. He
Yeah.
points out that a handful of classical composers
Right.
account for almost all the music played by orchestras today.
Right.
Or a tiny percentage of authors sell the majority of books.
Right.
Peterson isn't saying this to discourage us, though.
Right.
He's saying these hierarchies exist.
Right.
Instead of railing against them,
Yeah.
we should be striving and improving
Within them.
within them.
So it's not about comparing ourselves to others,
Right.
feeling inadequate.
Right.
It's about focusing on our own personal growth
Yes.
and being in that top percentage of contributor.
Exactly. And good posture, both
Yeah.
literally and metaphorically,
Right.
can be a powerful tool
Yeah.
for helping us achieve that,
Yeah.
taking ownership
Yeah.
and engaging with the world,
Okay.
even when it's challenging.
Let's move on to rule number 2.
Okay.
Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping.
Okay.
This one really resonated with me because I think
Yeah.
it's something we often struggle with.
Yes.
We're so quick to offer help and support to others.
Right.
But when it comes to ourselves,
Yeah.
we're much more critical
Right.
and neglectful.
Yeah.
Think about it. Are you as attentive to your own needs
Yeah.
and well-being
Yeah.
as you are to like a close friend or even a pet?
That's a great question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And Peterson uses this idea of chaos and order
Okay.
to frame the human struggle.
Okay.
And I think it's really helpful in understanding why we might struggle
Okay.
with self-care.
Okay.
He says that chaos
Yeah.
represents the unknown,
Okay.
the things we haven't explored
No.
or understood yet.
Right.
It can be unpredictable
Yeah.
and scary,
Yeah.
but it's also where freedom and potential lie.
Right.
Order
Yeah.
is what we know.
Okay.
Our comfort zones,
Yeah.
our routines, it brings stability and predictability,
Right.
but it can be stifling if we cling to it too tightly.
Okay. So how do we find that balance between chaos and order when it comes to taking care of ourselves?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Peterson argues we need to find a way to integrate both
Okay.
into our lives.
Right.
We need to be willing to venture out into the unknown,
Yeah.
challenge ourselves,
Right.
take risks,
Right.
but we also need to create that
Well,
solid foundation for ourselves, a sense of order and stability that allows us to thrive.
Right.
And sometimes that means treating ourselves with the same kindness,
Right.
compassion, and respect
Yeah.
that we would offer to someone we love.
That's such a powerful concept.
It is.
And it's easy to forget,
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
deserve that
Yeah.
same level of care and attention.
One of the reasons we might struggle with this
Yeah.
is because of another provocative statement Peterson makes.
Okay.
Only humans are capable of evil.
Okay.
Now, I know that might sound a bit dark,
Yeah.
but it actually ties into the importance of self-respect.
All right.
Peterson argues that while animals can be cruel,
Uh-huh.
they act mostly on instinct.
Right.
Humans, on the other hand,
Right.
we have self-awareness. We know what causes suffering,
Right.
and we can choose to inflict it on others, and
Right.
sometimes even ourselves.
Yeah. That's a pretty sobering thought.
It is.
So you're saying because we have this capacity
Yes.
for both good and evil,
Yes.
it's even more important to cultivate the good in ourselves.
Yes.
And that starts with...
And it starts with taking care of ourselves.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we are worthy of care,
Yeah.
even when we feel flawed or unworthy.
Right.
Building a strong foundation of self-respect
Yeah.
so we can make better choices for ourselves and others.
Which leads perfectly into rule number 3.
Okay.
Make friends with people
Yeah.
who want the best for you.
Right.
And this is where Peterson really challenges us
He does.
to take a hard look at our relationships.
Right.
He doesn't sugarcoat this one.
Yeah.
He says we should stop trying to rescue people
Right.
who don't want to be helped.
He says falling down is easier than getting back up.
Right.
And not everyone at the bottom wants to climb.
That can be a tough pill to swallow.
It can be, especially
if you're naturally inclined to be a helper.
especially if you're inclined to be a helper.
Right.
A rescuer.
It's easy to fall into the trap
Yeah.
of thinking we need to save everyone.
Yeah.
But Peterson argues that sometimes
Yeah.
trying to help someone
Yeah.
who isn't ready
Yeah.
can drag us down.
Yes.
And I love how he calls out the narcissism
Mm-hmm.
that can sometimes be behind this helping.
Yes.
Like, are we really doing this out of pure altruism?
Right.
Or are we trying to inflate our own sense of goodness?
Yeah, that's such an important question
Right.
to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
And Peterson reminds us
Yeah.
of Carl Rogers' idea
Right.
that the desire to change has to come from within.
Yeah.
We can't force someone to get better
Right.
if they're not ready.
So instead of trying to fix everyone around us,
Right.
maybe we should focus on
Right.
building relationships with people who inspire us to be better.
Yes. People who challenge us to grow
Right.
and celebrate our successes.
Yeah.
And let's be honest,
Yeah.
that can be a lot harder.
It's way harder.
And it sounds.
Because it's not always easy
Yeah.
to be around people who are striving and succeeding.
Yeah. Because it can expose our own shortcomings.
Right. But it's also incredibly motivating.
It is.
It's like surrounding yourself
Yeah.
with a team of personal cheerleaders
Right.
who believe in your potential,
Exactly.
even when you doubt yourself.
Okay.
Now, rule number 4
Okay.
tackles something
Okay.
I think we all struggle with.
Okay.
Compare yourself to who you were yesterday,
Okay.
not to who someone else is today.
Oh, yeah.
The internal critic, man, it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's always comparing us to others,
Yes.
making us feel inadequate.
Always.
Peterson breaks down
Right.
how this internal critic works.
Yeah.
And it's so insightful.
It is.
He says it picks a single area to compare, it's
Right.
like career success
Yeah.
or social media followers.
Yeah.
Makes it seem like that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And then pits you against someone who's excelling in that area.
Yeah, it's a recipe for misery.
It's a recipe for misery.
And what's worse is it's often inaccurate.
And it's totally inaccurate.
It is.
It's a trap because there's so many different games
Yeah.
we're playing in life.
Right.
We might be killing it in our careers,
Right.
but struggling in our relationships
Okay.
or vice versa.
Exactly.
And social media
That
only
hurts.
gives us
Yeah.
a curated glimpse into other people's lives.
Yeah.
So we're constantly comparing ourselves to an illusion.
An illusion. Yeah.
Right.
And Peterson emphasizes that real winning
Yeah.
is about personal growth.
Right.
It's not about measuring ourselves against this
Right.
external standard
Right.
that's often arbitrary.
Arbitrary. Yeah.
He urges us to focus on who we were yesterday and see how far we've come.
Right.
Maybe you're not a millionaire CEO yet,
Right.
but you're learning a new skill.
Right.
You're getting better at communicating.
Right.
You're building stronger relationships.
Yeah.
Those are all wins worth celebrating.
I love that. And I think this ties into
Yes.
the power of gratitude.
Yes.
Instead of focusing on what we lack,
Yeah.
what if we focus on what we do have?
Right.
How far we've come.
Yeah.
It can completely shift our perspective.
It can.
Make us feel more content and motivated.
Absolutely. It's like choosing to focus on the abundance in
Yeah.
our lives rather than the scarcity.
Right.
And that shift in perspective can make all the difference.
All right. Are you ready for rule number 5?
Okay, hit me.
This one's a doozy.
Okay.
I know it's sparked a lot of debate.
Okay.
Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them.
Okay.
This rule is definitely provocative,
It is.
and it's important to understand what Peterson means by it.
Yes.
It's not about being a tyrant
Wow.
or controlling your child's every move.
Right.
It's about setting boundaries
Right.
and
Yeah.
teaching them how to behave
Right.
in a way that will
Yeah.
make them likable
Right.
and successful in the world.
He uses that great analogy of the monkey trap
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yes.
The jar with the narrow neck?
Yes.
Treats inside.
Uh-huh.
The monkey comes along,
Right.
reaches in for the treats,
Yeah.
and his fist gets stuck.
Right.
He won't let go of the treats,
Right.
even though it means getting trapped.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
a lot of us as parents can
Yeah.
relate to that feeling
Yeah.
of being trapped
Yeah.
by our children's demands.
Yeah.
We want to give them everything,
Right.
make them happy,
Yeah.
but sometimes that's not what's best for them in the long run.
Right.
And Peterson connects this to kids getting so fixated on immediate gratification, on getting what they want right now,
Yeah.
that they can't see the bigger picture.
Right.
And it's our job as parents to help them learn that.
Right.
Sometimes delaying gratification,
Right.
saying no to themselves,
Mhm.
is the best path forward.
He even says that.
He does.
Sometimes not punishing a child
Right.
is worse than punishment.
He calls it damage by omission.
Damage by omission.
It's like if we don't teach our kids the consequences
Right.
of their actions,
Right.
if we're constantly rescuing them
Yeah.
from those natural consequences,
Right.
we're actually doing them a disservice.
It's like setting them up for failure in the real world,
We are.
where there are consequences for bad behavior.
Exactly. And it's not about being cruel
Right.
or punitive.
Right.
It's about guiding our children
Right.
to become responsible,
Right.
well-adjusted adults
Right.
who can navigate the world effectively.
This leads perfectly into rule number 6.
Okay.
Set your house in perfect order
Okay.
before you criticize the world.
Oh, yeah.
This one feels especially relevant these days,
It does.
with so much focus on societal problems.
Yeah.
Everyone pointing fingers.
It's a powerful reminder that we need to start with ourselves
Right.
before we try to fix the world.
Yeah.
Peterson uses the example of Hurricane Katrina
Okay.
to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
He points out
Yeah.
that while the hurricane was a natural disaster,
Uh-huh.
the devastating consequences
Right.
were exacerbated by human failure,
Right.
corruption, incompetence,
Uh-huh.
a lack of preparation.
He says, a hurricane is an act of God,
He does.
but failure to prepare is a sin.
I love that quote.
It's such a great quote.
It is.
Because it's a stark reminder
It is.
that we can't control everything
Right.
that happens to us.
Right.
But we can control,
We can control how we prepare and respond to those
Right.
events.
and so often we get caught up, complaining about the world,
Yeah.
all the things that are wrong,
Right.
without taking a hard look at our own lives,
Right.
asking, what can I do to make things better?
Exactly.
What small changes can I make
Yeah.
within my own sphere of influence?
It's a call to personal responsibility.
What's one small thing you could do today
Yeah.
to improve your relationships?
Yeah.
Or even your community?
Right.
Maybe it's cleaning up your workspace,
Yeah.
making amends with a friend,
Yeah.
or finally starting that project you've been putting off,
Right.
taking ownership of our little corner of the world
Yeah.
before we try to tackle the bigger issues.
It's interesting because this idea of taking responsibility for our own lives ties into rule number 7.
Okay.
Pursue what is meaningful,
Okay.
not what is expedient.
Right.
And this rule builds on this foundational idea
Okay.
that Peterson returns to again and again.
Yeah.
Life is suffering.
He doesn't shy away from that reality.
He doesn't.
But he also argues
Right.
that Meaning can be found
Through suffering.
through suffering.
Through choosing to do what's right even when it's hard.
Right.
This is where he talks about the
Yeah.
importance of sacrifice
Uh-huh.
and delayed gratification.
Right.
He describes this ancient bargain
Right.
that humans made with the future.
Uh-huh.
This idea that
Okay.
by sacrificing something in the present,
Right.
we can gain something greater in the future.
Yeah.
Think about our ancestors
Yeah.
who had to endure harsh conditions,
Yeah.
hunt for food,
Right.
build shelter.
Right.
They were constantly sacrificing their immediate comfort
Right.
for the sake of survival,
Yeah.
the well-being of their families.
And he even goes so far to say
He does.
that the most valuable sacrifice
Yeah,
is often the self.
it's a bold statement.
It's a bold statement.
But it gets to the heart of his philosophy. He uses the story of Jesus in the desert
Oh, yeah. Tell me about
to
that.
illustrate this point.
Okay.
So in this story,
Yeah.
Jesus is tempted by Satan 3 times.
Right.
First, Satan tempts him with food
Okay.
because Jesus is starving after fasting in the desert for 40 days.
Yeah.
Jesus refuses,
Okay.
saying, "Man shall not live on bread alone,
Okay.
but on every word that comes from the mouth of God."
Meaning there's things more important than immediate gratification,
There are.
even when you're suffering physically.
Exactly.
Right.
Then Satan tempts Jesus to throw himself off the cliff,
Okay.
claiming that God will save him.
Uh-huh.
Jesus again refuses,
Right.
saying, "Do not put the Lord your God to the test."
So it's about taking responsibility for our own actions,
It is.
not expecting God to bail us out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally,
Yeah.
Satan tempts Jesus with power,
Wait.
offering him dominion over
Yeah.
all the kingdoms of the world.
The ultimate temptation.
Yeah, it is.
Who wouldn't want that?
Right. But Jesus refuses this temptation as well,
Okay.
recognizing that power without purpose,
Yeah.
without a higher calling,
Yeah.
can be incredibly corrupting.
What's the point of all the power in the world if you're using it for
Right.
selfish or destructive ends?
Exactly. And this is a consistent theme
Right.
in Peterson's work.
Yeah.
The idea that true meaning comes from striving for something
Right.
greater than ourselves,
Right.
something that transcends our own selfish desires.
And sometimes that means
It does.
making sacrifices,
Yeah.
delaying gratification,
Mm-hmm.
and choosing the harder path.
And choosing the harder path. But it's through those choices
Yeah.
that we build character,
Uh-huh.
develop resilience,
Right.
and find a sense of purpose
Yeah.
that can sustain us
Right.
through life's inevitable challenges.
Totally. Yeah.
It's about aligning ourselves with what Peterson calls the highest good. And that often involves making sacrifices, delaying gratification, and choosing the harder path. It's not always easy, but it's the path to a truly meaningful life.
You know, speaking of choosing the harder path, that brings us to rule number 8.
Okay.
Tell the truth. Or at least don't lie.
Right.
Seems pretty straightforward on the surface, right?
Yeah, don't lie.
Don't lie. But Peterson, of course, goes much deeper than that.
He does. He argues that lying, even small, seemingly harmless lies, they erode our character and weaken us in the face of adversity. It's like each lie we tell creates a tiny crack in our integrity. And over time, those cracks can become major fault lines, making it harder to stand up for ourselves and for what we believe in.
So it's not just about being morally upright.
Right.
It's about building that strong internal foundation
Exactly.
that can withstand pressure.
Yeah. And Peterson connects this to bigger
Yeah.
societal problems as well. He argues that individual dishonesty is the seed of societal corruption. You know, if we can't be honest with ourselves and with each other, how can we expect to build a just and trustworthy society?
Yeah.
It starts with each of us,
Yeah.
making the commitment to truthfulness in our own lives.
And I love how he uses that workplace example to illustrate this.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine your boss implements some new rule that's totally pointless,
Right.
makes everyone's life harder.
Right. And it's a bad rule.
You know it's a bad rule.
But you don't say anything.
You don't say anything. You're like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, you tell yourself it's not worth the hassle.
Yeah.
It's just a small thing.
But then it happens again and again.
Right.
Each time you stay silent.
Yeah. You've essentially trained yourself
Right.
to accept these little injustices.
And it makes it easier to accept the bigger ones down the line.
Right. And it's like we become desensitized
Yeah.
to dishonesty and compromise our values
Bit by bit.
little by little. And Peterson's point is that speaking up, even about seemingly small things, is essential for building a strong character and for resisting tyranny in all its forms.
It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, like,
Yeah, this is not okay.
this is not okay.
I will not participate in this dishonesty,
Right.
no matter how small it seems.
He even goes so far as to say that
He does.
deceitful, inauthentic individual existence is the precursor to social totalitarianism.
A bold statement.
That's a bold statement.
But it highlights the importance of personal integrity as a foundation for a just and free society.
Okay, now, rule number 9,
Okay.
one that I think we could all benefit from practicing more,
Yeah,
especially in today's world.
especially today.
Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't.
Ooh, I like that one.
We live in a world where everyone's shouting their opinions.
Right.
But how often do we actually listen
Right.
to what others have to say,
Yeah, that's
especially
good.
those who hold different views than our own?
It's so true. We're so focused on getting our own point across
Right.
that we forget to listen and learn from others.
Right. And Peterson emphasizes
Yeah.
that true listening is about being open to the possibility
Yes.
that someone else might have something valuable to teach us,
Yes. Even if we don't agree with them on everything.
even if we don't agree with them on everything. And he suggests this
He does.
really practical technique
Yeah.
for improving our listening skills.
What is it?
He says that in a conversation.
Yeah.
Each person should have to summarize the other person's point of view
Okay.
accurately
Okay.
before they can respond with their own.
I love that technique.
It's such a great technique.
It forces us to slow down, to pay attention,
Yes.
and to make sure we're not just hearing what we want to hear,
Right.
but actually understanding the other person's perspective.
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer for communication.
It helps us avoid those frustrating conversations where we're just talking past each other,
Yes, we're not really engaging
not engaging with each other's ideas.
with each other's ideas. And Peterson highlights that this kind of deep listening
Right.
can lead to much more interesting and productive conversations.
Because we're not just waiting for our turn to speak.
We're not.
We're actually like engaging with their ideas,
We are.
trying to learn from them.
We might even find that we change our own minds in the process.
Totally. Yeah.
It's about recognizing that everyone has something valuable to offer, even if we don't agree with them on everything.
Right.
And who knows, we might even learn something new about ourselves
Okay.
in the process.
Rule number 10,
Okay.
one that I think a lot of us struggle with.
Okay.
Be precise in your speech.
Oh, yeah.
We all know those people who are masters of vagueness,
Right.
dance around issues,
Yeah.
never quite say what they mean.
So frustrating.
Peterson argues
Yeah.
that this kind of imprecise language actually makes life harder,
Harder. Not easier.
not
Yeah. It leads to misunderstandings, resentment, and a lot of wasted time and energy.
And he uses a children's book
He does.
called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon
Oh, yeah. That's a great one.
to illustrate this point.
Yeah, in the story, this little boy sees a dragon in his room,
Right.
but his mom keeps denying its existence.
Yeah.
And as a result, the dragon just keeps growing bigger and bigger,
Right.
causing all sorts of chaos.
It's such a powerful metaphor for how our problems
It is.
can escalate
They do.
when we refuse to acknowledge them directly.
When we refuse to acknowledge them.
Peterson says,
Yeah.
when we avoid naming our problems,
Uh-huh.
when we refuse to articulate our feelings or needs,
Right.
clearly,
Yes.
those problems tend to fester and grow.
It's like sweeping dirt under the rug.
Right.
It might look clean on the surface,
Yeah.
but eventually all that dirt's going to create a huge mess.
Right. And he applies this to all areas of life,
He does.
including marriage.
Including marriage, he says that couples need to be willing to talk about even the smallest annoyances.
Right.
Because if they're left unaddressed, they can turn into huge relationship-ending issues.
Right.
He emphasizes that everything clarified and articulated becomes visible,
Right.
meaning that by naming our problems precisely, we bring them out into the open where we can actually start to address them.
It's about taking responsibility
It is.
for our own thoughts and feelings.
Right.
Communicating them clearly, respectfully to others.
Yes, it can be uncomfortable at first.
It can.
But it's essential for healthy relationships
Yeah.
and a fulfilling life.
And it's interesting because this ties back
It does.
to rule number 9,
Yeah.
the importance of listening.
Right.
When we're precise in our speech, we're making it easier
We are.
for others to understand us.
We are.
That creates a foundation for more effective communication,
Right.
negotiation.
It's like we're giving others a clear roadmap to our inner world, which makes it easier for them to meet our needs and to support us.
Exactly.
And Peterson encourages us to
Yeah.
think carefully about what we're trying to communicate
Right.
and to choose our words with precision.
Yeah.
It's a skill that takes practice, but it's well worth the effort.
Okay, now rule number 11,
Okay.
one that I think has sparked a lot of debate,
Okay.
especially in our current cultural climate.
All right.
Do not bother children when they are skateboarding.
This rule might seem a bit out of place at first glance,
Yeah, it does.
but Peterson uses it to explore some really complex ideas about gender roles, risk-taking, and the role of culture in shaping our lives.
Right.
I think it's particularly relevant in a society where we often try to eliminate all risk from children's lives.
Yeah. He argues that boys in particular
Yeah.
need opportunities to push their limits, to face challenges, to develop competence.
He uses skateboarding as an example,
Right.
pointing out that it's a physically demanding activity
Yeah.
with inherent risks.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also an activity where kids can
Right.
test their limits, develop skills, and gain a sense of mastery.
And gain a sense of mastery.
Oh.
It's about learning to fall down and get back up again.
Right. Both literally and metaphorically.
Both literally and metaphorically.
And he contrasts this with what he sees as a trend toward overprotecting children,
Yeah, especially boys.
especially boys.
Discouraging them from engaging in activities
Right.
that are perceived as too risky.
Too risky. And he argues that this kind of risk aversion
Yeah.
can actually stunt their development
Right.
and prevent them from becoming resilient
Right.
and capable adults.
It's like we're sending them the message that the world is a dangerous place.
Right.
That needs to be avoided
That needs to be avoided.
rather than a place to be explored.
Yeah, a place to be mastered.
And mastered?
Right. And he ties this to the broader cultural conversation
Yeah.
about masculinity,
Yeah.
arguing that we need to be careful not to pathologize traditional male behaviors like risk-taking and competition.
These behaviors, when channeled appropriately,
Right.
can be incredibly valuable assets in life.
I think this rule is particularly challenging
It is.
because it forces us to confront our own anxiety
Anxieties.
about risk and safety.
risk and safety.
You know, we want to protect our children,
We do.
but we also have to give them the space
But we have to grow and learn.
to grow and learn from their own experience.
It's about finding that balance
That is.
between safety and freedom,
Right.
between supporting our children
Yeah.
and trusting them to navigate the world
To navigate the world on their own terms, it's not easy,
on their own terms.
but it's essential for their development.
Okay, now let's wrap up
Okay.
with rule number 12.
All right.
Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
Now, this one might seem like a bit of a non sequitur
Right.
after all the heavy philosophical stuff we've been discussing.
But it actually ties into one of Peterson's core ideas about the importance of embracing limitations and finding joy in the simple things.
Right.
He argues that limitations are essential to being human.
Right.
He uses the example of imagining his son as an indestructible robot.
Okay.
It would eliminate all risk and vulnerability,
Yeah.
but it would also erase everything that makes him unique and lovable.
Like without limitations, without challenges to overcome, we wouldn't have anything to strive for, nothing to learn, from no story to tell.
Right. Life would be pretty boring.
Life would be pretty boring.
And he uses the act of petting a cat
Yeah.
as a metaphor for embracing the small joys and simple pleasures in life,
Right.
even amidst the suffering and chaos.
It's about finding those moments of connection.
Right.
A beauty of gratitude, even in the midst of difficulty.
Yes. It's a reminder that life is not all about grand ambitions and striving for perfection.
Yeah.
It's also about appreciating the small, everyday things that make life worth living.
And sometimes something as simple as petting a cat
It can be.
can be a powerful antidote to despair.
It brings us back to the present moment.
Yeah.
And reminds us of the simple goodness that exists in the world.
Yeah, it's like a little nudge to slow down.
Right.
Be present.
Yeah.
Appreciate the little things. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes in the rush of daily life,
Yeah.
we forget to just pause and enjoy the simple things.
We do.
Peterson reminds us that those moments of joy
Yeah.
are all around us if we just take the time to notice them.
He does. And he even connects this to a larger concept of the divine.
Okay.
He says that, if God were truly all-powerful,
Yeah.
all-knowing,
Yeah.
there would be no limitations.
Right.
No story, no possibility for growth or change.
Right.
It's through limitations
Yeah.
that we experience the
Yeah.
richness and complexity of
Yeah.
being human.
You know, I think we often have this idea
We do?
that if we could just eliminate all our problems,
Yeah,
life would be perfect.
right.
But Peterson's suggesting
He is.
that it's through those struggles, those
Yeah.
limitations, that
Yes.
we find meaning and purpose.
Exactly. It's like the Japanese art of kintsugi,
Okay.
where broken pottery is repaired with gold,
Yeah.
highlighting the cracks and imperfections
Mhm.
rather than trying to hide them.
Right.
The brokenness becomes part of the object's beauty and history.
Right.
In a way, Peterson's suggesting
Yeah.
we can apply that same philosophy
Yeah.
to our own lives.
I love that analogy. So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
What are some of the key takeaways
Yeah.
you hope listeners will walk away with from this deep dive into 12 rules for life?
Well, I think one of the overarching themes is the importance of personal responsibility.
Hmm.
Peterson challenges us to take ownership of our lives, to make choices that align with our values and strive for our own betterment, even when it's hard. He doesn't sugarcoat the fact that life can be challenging, but he also offers a roadmap for navigating those challenges and creating a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
He's definitely not afraid to tell us to suck it up,
Right.
do the hard work, but he also gives us a lot of practical tools
He does.
and strategies
He does.
for how to actually do that work.
Right.
He encourages us to set clear goals, be precise in our language, cultivate good habits, surround ourselves with people who support our growth, and maybe most importantly, to be kind to ourselves along the way.
And he reminds us that life is not about avoiding suffering. It's about finding meaning and purpose through our struggles. He encourages us to embrace those challenges, to learn from them, and to use them as opportunities for growth. It's about recognizing that we are not defined by our failures or our setbacks, but by how we choose to respond to them.
He also emphasizes the importance of telling the truth,
Yes.
both to ourselves and to others.
Yes, and to listen deeply, to be open to learning from those who hold different viewpoints. It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that there's always more to learn.
I think Peterson's work is so compelling because he doesn't shy away from the big questions, from the complexities of human existence. He challenges us to think deeply, to question our assumptions, and to strive for a more meaningful life.
He's definitely not for everyone, but I think there's something in his work that resonates with a lot of people, regardless of their background or beliefs.
I agree. He speaks to this longing for meaning, for purpose, for something that transcends our everyday struggles, and he offers a roadmap, a set of principles for how to find that meaning.
Peterson says, you already know what you know, and unless your life is perfect, what you know is not enough. So what one thing will you commit to learning to make your life a little less imperfect? Maybe it's starting a gratitude practice, working on your posture, having a difficult conversation, or even just petting a cat.
It's about taking those small steps, those incremental actions that ultimately lead to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. And if you want to explore these ideas further, I highly encourage you to pick up 12 Rules for Life. It's a challenging read, but it's definitely worth the effort. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.